everyone. I'm Michelle Fong with Real Property Management. We are Canada's largest network of property managers, and that is from coast to coast. We currently have 25 offices, and we are growing. But as Patrick mentioned, we are the boots on the ground people. We are people who are dealing with investment properties day in and day out, and quite honestly, it's our business. As some of the speakers tonight will describe themselves, they are honestly weirdos about property management because this is what we love to do. So a little bit about what we're going to be covering tonight. I wanted to make sure that everyone got some expert market insights from the RPM team here. So we are talking about Calgary, Kelowna, Toronto, and a little bit of Halifax, along with some communities of interest for anyone who's looking for different types of opportunities. There will be a discussion for question and answers at the end, but feel free to throw your questions into the chat anytime that comes to mind. We will take some minutes after each speaker to address any direct questions about local markets. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Arshad, who is an esteemed broker who is well versed not only in property management, but also in real estate trading. But really, why we love this guy is that the fact that he is just so passionate about helping everybody around him. You can see it in the way that people speak about his brokerage, as well as all of his clients always do say the best reviews about Arshad. So again, everyone, please join me in welcoming Arshad Rashid.
Thank you for the intro, Michelle. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. So I guess the topic for today, I'm in the Calgary market, and everyone is talking about Calgary, the media nationwide, and we're just going to go over a few of the events in 2023. So Calgary's seen super restricted conditions in the market. Interest rates have impacted rental rates and availability. Tenant migration patterns from Ontario and BC, high demand versus low supply. So that seems to be that's how it is in Calgary. I know in other markets it's a little different, but we've seen the restrictions in the market. Basically, there's no inventory, and as interest rates went up, rental rates followed, and the availability became pretty restricted. The migration, people are coming here for job opportunities, and looking at all major cities across Canada, Calgary is the most affordable, even though we as locals feel that prices have increased quite a bit. So the demand is there and the supply is pretty low. We get asked all the time key neighborhoods of interest in Calgary. So the entire city is in demand. And if for investors that are looking into invest in Calgary and not from Calgary, I would pay attention to anything that's close to an LRT line, specialty schools or shopping, the University of Calgary and SAIT. Those areas have seen quite a bit of interest, and the rental rates are keeping up. Everyone here, almost every property can cash flow positive. It's good income. The University District, which is revitalized, has got very nice product coming in. For investors, they've got product that you can purchase today and not take possession in a year or two. So it gives you some time to build up that deposit and equity, what investors from Ontario are actually looking for. So these are the areas that are in high interest. And then the next slide here. So current market trends and forecasts. So on the real estate side and the rental side, we'll talk a little bit of both. Legalized basement suites, we're finding in our portfolio are having the best cash flow. You rent out the main floor and the basement, you're getting good rental income, and the city of Calgary's made it quite easy for legalized suites. We're seeing more of that product. Resales and rentals are in pretty high demand. Low inventory to continue what we were discussing, the potential increase on rental rates. We're going to talk about residents are staying in their homes for a longer extended periods of time, and we'll talk about what people are doing to bring in cash flow, maybe carriage houses in the back, and then the forecast. So the legalized basement suites, if you're looking at product compared to apartments, townhouses, if you can find a single family home with a legalized basement suite, the numbers work much better. The cash flow is quite substantial compared to other products, and you don't have to deal with condo fees eating away at the cash flow. When it comes to low inventory, I think we're going to continue to see that. That's in the forecast. It's going to stay like that in Calgary for quite some time. I say at least a few years. We're not going to see higher inventory levels. The Calgary Real Estate Board has forecasted a 6.5% increase in pricing. Personal experience, boots on the ground. We have a large real estate brokerage. I think that number is going to be closer to 10 or 15, potentially more depending on what happens with interest rates come springtime. Investment opportunities in various locations. So what we're noticing, Northeast Calgary is got huge demand, long-term rentals, and the vacancy is less than 1%. Northwest and inner city is also in hot demand. Anything close to an LRT or easy transportation to going to work, we're seeing good demand there. But Northeast Calgary is quite dense, and it's a demographic that is quite diverse. So we're seeing lots of rental opportunities, multi-generational families, or even roommates coming in. There's a good workforce there, good transportation. So the demand there is really good. Northwest, we're seeing a lot more single family. Inner city is the multifamily. So multifamily, fourplex, sixplex, apartment style, those are in hot demand. And obviously, downtown Calgary, the apartments are doing very well. So some tips for maximizing return on investment. So as we talk to our landlords and they're talking about, okay, what can we do to maximize our investment, get best returns, and what are some of the tips that we can improve in our properties? We're noticing outdoor space is pretty important. Well manicured landscape properties, they tend to do slightly better. The main unit in itself, well maintained, it does, brings you a little bit better cash flow. Nice appliances goes a long ways. And then legalized basement suites, again, as we discussed earlier. A detached garage is also a good opportunity to maybe rent out separately for storage. We're seeing high demand for storage in Calgary. They can rent separately, which adds to your cash flow. And then a lot of landlords, we're starting to educate them on the fact that maybe allow multi-generational families or roommates. And if we do the proper tenant screening, and a good property management company will have proper screening in place to mitigate some of those risks when you're having roommates. But it's a trend that I think is going to continue we're going to see in Calgary. We haven't seen that in Calgary before, as we are seeing now. And it's just another house hack where roommates are getting together, whether they're students, where they work at the same place. Northeast Calgary, we're finding a big base. The Amazon warehouse is just north of Calgary in Balzac area, and there's direct transportation lines. So we're seeing a lot of roommate situations that all may work at Amazon. That's something to keep in mind. And then mitigating some of those risks, the property management companies can, and a good property manager can do that. You can't mitigate all the risks when it comes to roommate situation because they may not get along. But if you have rules in place and you have systems set up where it gets mitigated, it can actually be more profitable. And we're starting to see a big trend in that. So we're trying to convince, a lot of landlords don't like that, but we're trying to work on convincing them to make room for that, as we're seeing the demand is there. And then quality PM companies equipped with detailed tenant screening helps. Preventive maintenance, that's the key point. If you can do the preventive maintenance, it gives you a return on investment. It doesn't eat away and don't have surprise expenses. So those are the key points. And then navigating the ups and downs of real estate. So we always have a saying, plan to be in the market rather than timing the market. As long as you're in, if the numbers work, you talk to your property manager and make sure that what they're forecasting that's going to come in for rental roll is going to cover most of your costs, and you're going to cash flow. As long as you're in the market, it's impossible to time it. Anything can happen. I think in Calgary, we're going to continue to see the rental rates going up. but it's impossible to time. So there will be ups and downs. Plan for the emergencies. We're trying to set up reserve funds. We educate all our landlords to have a reserve fund on the side for those emergencies and understand the market nuances of different neighborhoods. One mistake some investors that are not familiar with Calgary they're making, they're looking at price points. Okay, what's the best price point? They're looking at average rents that is posted, and they're comparing that. But not all neighborhoods are made the same, and some will not command the same rental rates. So a good property manager or real estate agent will be able to educate you on, okay, well, this neighborhood tends to do better. These neighborhoods maybe stay away from. These are points that you should, as an investor, educate yourself on and have boots on the ground telling you, okay, this is what the reality is. All right, predictions for the real estate market in 2024. Quite honestly, nobody knows. I personally believe that in Calgary, we are going to continue to stay in demand. We are a hotspot for the rest of Canada. Affordability is generally, when you compare it to major cities like Toronto or Vancouver, we are much more affordable. So we will continue to stay this way, I think, for some time to come. Rental prices will increase. There's a huge demand for properties that are under 600,000. We're seeing on the real estate side, 10 to 15 offers on properties that are under 600K that are detached. Apartment style homes, there are, on the real estate side, it is the first time in the last 2-3 years where we're seeing an increase in pricing. Apartments generally in the Alberta market, and Calgary in particular, were on a 10-year decline in pricing. So that means whoever invested, they were losing year after year money on what they could resell those properties for. For the first time in the last 10, 15 years, we're seeing an increase. And that is probably due to a lot of immigration and the fact that interest rates and affordability has brought people down to, okay, well, we can't afford a single family anymore. We're going to settle for an apartment. So we're seeing quite a bit of demand there. And then in the long run, I think rentals will remain in high demand. It may reduce slightly in 2024, depending on what happens with migration. And multifamily, huge demand. We don't have enough. Even what's under construction, I don't think will fulfill the demand that's going to be coming.
Appreciate the insight, Arshad, and thank you so much for giving us your tips and tricks for Calgary here. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So very first off, in Calgary, around the city bylaws, is there a number of unrelated people, or how many kind of leases are we looking at per property?
A number of what? Sorry, repeat that question, Michelle.
A number of unrelated people, or is there multiple leases that you are signing per property?
So it could be different if it's a main floor legal suite and maybe a garage unit or a carriage unit above the garage. You'll have separate leases, but usually what we're starting to see is a group of people will get together, whether they're students, co-workers, one lease. They're all named on the lease, and they're sharing the accommodations. We recommend having one person in charge financially, and then they do the collections amongst themselves. But we have the ability to bill separately to each person if that's what the need is.
Fantastic. As well as, what percentage of the rental is a good amount to set aside as a reserve fund?
I would say 5 to 10%. Just set it aside, and if you don't use it at the end of the year, your property manager could help with the budgeting, depending on what type of home it is. If it's older, needs work, and it's a work in progress, I would use a higher percentage. And if it's brand new, then much less. But I would say keep 5% aside at least on the minimum.
5% per month or annual? Like
Per month.
each month? Okay,
Per
perfect.
month.
As well as your predictions, those are more for long term, just to confirm that, correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. And lastly, can you describe what multifamily looks like to you?
So multifamily, traditionally, it's, fourplex, sixplex, 8, 10, 12 units, 24 unit apartment buildings. But today, if the city has made it quite easy to get legal suites in, and they're lenient on it. So you could with the new zoning that's coming in Calgary. So we've got something called RCG zoning, which allows 3 to 4 units on a property. So we're noticing investors are coming in taking out the old home, building a 3 to 4 unit on there, plus legal suites. So traditionally, what was happening in Calgary, if you had an RC2 zoning, you'd take down the old home and build a duplex, and that was all you could get. Then it got a little bit better where you can do legal suites, and now they're discussing blanket zoning for across the city, which means you could have RCG zoning for every property in the city. Take out that property, you can build up to 4 units, and if it's a corner unit, you may be able to get more, but all of them will have legal suites. So that means if you've got a 4 unit with legal suites, that's 8 doors. So that's what multifamily would mean to me.
Oh, fantastic. And last question, do you have any predictions for short-term rentals in Calgary? What is that kind of looking like in the future here?
Personally, I think with the new rules that BC came out, I have a feeling if the housing issue in Calgary persists, Alberta may come out on a ruling and follow suit to what BC is doing and ban them. No one's talked about it yet, but that is my prediction. A lot of apartment buildings, condo boards have banned them. It's hard to get those now. So there's specific buildings that allow it still, and they actually command more money. So it depends where you want to invest, but I find that I feel there's gonna be a lot more restrictions in the future. So I'm a little weary of it.
Thank you so much, Arshad. And as always, it's such a pleasure and a treat to hear from you as someone as experienced and seasoned in real estate as you are. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Michelle, can I jump in and make a couple of observations?
Of course.
Yeah, so there's a couple things here, folks, that I want to point out. That I don't want to step over now that we've kind of got started and got the room in here. And there's a number of things. So first off, as many of you know, and hopefully most of you know, RPM is a trusted partners of the Real Estate Investment Network. That's all why we're here. And part of getting the insights that somebody like Arshad is sharing with us, or any of our guests or our speakers tonight, is they are in fact in it. Now, you heard Arshad talking about what's going on in Northeast and the focus of Northeast or Northwest. There's another side of this too, and that through certain aspects of real estate cycles, there's always the pressure, in budgets, and saying, well, what do I do? Do I get a property manager? Do I manage my own? Of course, if you're out of town, it's no question. You need property management. The other side of that, of course, is that, we have to be really aware that property managers do one thing that we don't do well, and that is they have their finger on the pulse of the rental market. Now, Arshad, I'd like you to speak to something that's really important in Alberta that BC and Ontario don't appreciate, and that is the ability to raise rents. We don't have the rent controls that we do here in British Columbia or in Ontario. So why don't we just speak to the opportunities that presents investors in terms of being able to increase rents and not have to feel the same pressure like in British Columbia. I mean, it's hard to get anybody out of your unit. In Ontario, especially if they're a bad tenant, in Ontario, it's very similar. Whereas in Alberta, we've got more flexibility. We don't have those regulations. So do you want to just speak to that briefly? Because I know there's a lot of capital coming out of Ontario and British Columbia into Alberta, specifically Calgary. So why don't we just touch on that? I think it's an important point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point because we're seeing that a lot of our investors from Ontario, they're trying to get away from some of the restrictions there. I find it's a fair balance between landlord and tenant, and the rent controls, they're not there. You can increase rent however you like. When the lease is up, you can increase it to what you like, and it's up to the tenant to decide whether they want to stay or not. And if it's on a month-to-month lease, you just have to give a 90-day notice for rental increases. So if there's something else that comes in and it's a budget item that wasn't accounted for, you have the ability to mitigate some of that based on and our policies on getting bad tenants out are a lot better than what we're seeing across the country, and I feel it's a fair deal.
It's such an important point that I want to make, and I want to try to light something, that I mean, we've been talking about Alberta for the past 4 years hard, even leading up to pre-2020. We could see what was starting to happen in the Alberta market, specifically Calgary. So a couple of points I just want to hit on. because we do so much research in Alberta. We do it right across the country, but of course, what is standout is what's happening in Alberta economically, and there's no denying it. Now, Arshad said something that was really interesting that we need to shine a light on. If you're in Alberta, it's like, oh my gosh, the prices are, they're off the charts. It's crazy. Everything's nuts. And then if you, however, spend any time outside of that province or outside of Calgary, you start to realize just how inexpensive it is. Now, what does that all mean? It means, to the point that Arshad made, there's room to run in this. Keep in mind something, that part of what drives rents, what's part of drives housing prices is not just immigration, supply and demand, that kind of narrative. What also drives it is incomes. And in Alberta, they are, Calgary specifically, I don't know if they're the highest, but I think, I don't remember off the top of my head too many numbers, but we're one of the highest incomes in the country. Weekly incomes, net take-home pay is higher. So disposable income is higher. So that means that there is more room to be able to run in terms of price increases. And you've got a great economy and good paying jobs, and a lot of jobs that are still there. Now, I know there's lots of kind of, we'll call it rhetoric mostly, but there is certainly some softening in some sectors, but Alberta still has a long way to go with that. So for those of you who are out of province, Alberta's still a great place to look at. I can't stress enough, make sure you're dealing with an investor-focused realtor. Full stop. I'll just leave it there. And then, of course, having some great property management as an out-of-town investor is an absolute must. So I don't want to run on too long, but I think it was an important point to make right here.
Definitely. Get your power team together. Speaking of
Exactly.
which, I would like to introduce our next speaker, a fellow prairie gal to myself, but she is someone who truly inspires everybody around her. Not only because she runs one of the top property management offices in the Okanagan, but also just because she truly believes in the power of community. Not only can you feel that in her business, but it is felt throughout all of the Okanagan areas. So please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Trina Carson-Piva of Real Property Management Executives.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Hopefully I'm not going to be sneezing and coughing. I'm struggling with a cold, so I've got my Neocitrin here. I'm sure I'll be okay. Really glad to be here. Love talking about property management. Love especially talking about property management in BC. It's a pretty dynamic place to be, and in particular in Kelowna and the Okanagan. So lots of things happening in the Okanagan here and in Kelowna. Particularly big news item right now is, of course, the short-term rental changes in legislation. There has been, basically, the provincial government has come in and pretty much put a moratorium on short-term vacation properties. And to further that, our municipal government here in Kelowna has even brought in stricter regulations so that it's pretty much obliterated the industry here for the most part. So this is having a ripple effect on a lot of ways in properties that are coming onto the market, the consequences of pre-sales that have been purchased, and of course, the shortage of housing that we're all hearing about here in BC, which is why the government on a provincial and municipal level are making these really big changes to the legislation to try to increase the number of long-term rental units in the market. So big changes with the legislation. And then, of course, zoning is changing as well. Just today, there was an update in the news in Kelowna here where the city is changing the bylaws on multifamily property zoning. So before, it was very difficult to be in the zoning to have a secondary legal suite on your property. Now they're pretty much opening the doors for that. So it's going to be a lot easier for legal secondary suites, whether it be carriage houses or infill projects or even just legalized secondary suites in the basement. So all these things to increase more units on the market definitely is impacting the market here yet. So Kelowna, the Okanagan, is the California of Canada. we've got skiing, we've got wine, we've got orchards. It is an amazing place to be. It's always going to be a vital and thriving community as far as I'm concerned. It is one of the fastest growing cities in the country right now. There has been an exponential increase of business licenses being issued to new businesses in Kelowna. I think it was 26% increase in the last 3 years, which is pretty significant. We've got some very reputable post-secondary education institutions here that are attracting a lot of students from across Canada and abroad. And is a lot of building going on here. So you drive around Kelowna right now and there are cranes to be seen everywhere, a lot of building up. So there's a lot of multifamily units being built right now, lots of rental specific builds happening right now. Definitely an increase in inventory with all the new building, plus of course, all of these short-term rental properties that are now going to be, well, they're hoping is going to be added to the rental market. I don't quite agree that it's going to, but definitely all the new building is going to impact that. And then there are even some issues where, there's going to be some frustrations with this new building, all this new building going on. The borrowing conditions have changed. The cost of building has changed. And there is going to be, I think, a trend that we're going to see of people who are going to be defaulting perhaps on their pre-sales because they can't get the financing and the cost of borrowing money has increased. And a lot of those units they bought were to be short-term rentals that they can't do anymore. So it's going to create definitely a flood of properties on the market. Investment opportunities. So definitely there's going to be a frustration in closing some of these short-term rental properties. So I think we're going to see more of those going on the market. We're getting a lot of calls daily from very nervous investors who have bought properties specifically for short-term that they're not going to be able to do anymore. They got the financing for those purchases when the cost of borrowing money was lower and they were expecting higher values of rent because they were going to get short-term. Now the cost of borrowing money is higher and the long-term rental rates are not going to be comparable to those high value, $1,000 a night, $600 a night short-term rentals that they were hoping to see. So that is definitely going to affect the situation. Lots of building going on here. And like I said, changes in the zoning. In our north end right now, I think we've got 16 hectares of it used to be the old Tolka mine site that is now the city still trying to figure out what design plan they're going to do with it, but it's going to be a lot of building going on over there. And just lots of movement. There's going to be people who are trying to decide what to do with their short-term rentals. Do they keep it and pay spec tax and not put in a long-term tenant? Do they sell it? So if you're an investor and you've got some cash on hand and access to cash, or you can leverage some of your equity in your portfolio, there's definitely going to be some really interesting opportunities around the corner over the next year for sure. Tips on maximizing return on investment. So this is the stuff we love to talk about. If you were an investor in Kelowna in the Okanagan in the last 5 years, you've had it pretty good. We were getting some of the highest rental values in the country. Rental vacancy rates were extremely low. We were placing tenants, we just had to put up a for rent sign and we'd be getting dozens of applicants in one day. Definitely there's more on the market right now. We're not seeing despite the news saying that the rental rate or the vacancy rates are low, we're not actually seeing it to be as low as what they're reporting. Properties are sitting on the market longer, but mostly because the investors are really attached to those prices they were getting in 2021. And they're having a hard time accepting that they're not going to be cash flow positive now. So we're having a lot of conversations with clients saying that if you're in real estate investment, you have to understand it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you're looking to be cash flow positive immediately, that the likelihood of that, even though we were seeing it a couple years ago, is unlikely now. And so to treat your investment like a business, you open up a new business, you start a new startup, you're not going to be making the money in the first year. You're not going to be making a bunch of profit. It's going to take some time to get the momentum and to build the equity and to build your systems. And being involved in investment property is no different. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Definitely treat your tenants like they're customers. They're not just a means to an end of paying your mortgage. It's really, really important to get good tenants in there with the RTB rules the way they are in BC, so strict and so hard to get out a bad tenant once you place them. But if you think of your tenants like a customer and they're paying, $25,000 to $50,000 a year, if this was a client of yours that was paying you that much a year, a customer, you're going to take damn good care of them. So treat your tenants like they're your customers in your business. Be responsive, be courteous, take care of them. They were taking care of your property. We need to take care of them. So for real property management here in Kelowna, taking care of our tenants, the emphasis on putting in good tenants, being reactive and responsive is so paramount to the investment return, making sure that you get those people in there who are going to look after it like it was their own property, and who are going to definitely be maximizing the return on your investment. Predictions. So definitely the interest rates are going to be a big indicator. And we're seeing in Vancouver, the rumor mill is that we're getting back to having multiple offers on properties. This could lead to this momentum of this fear of missing out and everybody getting excited. With there being multiple properties that we expect to be going onto the market because of all these new builds and new development, and then the short-term rentals, it does tend to create kind of a bit of a frenzy. So really, we're seeing that investing in real estate in the Okanagan is always going to be a good idea. This is a place that is growing and thriving. Business is thriving. We got a fantastic tech industry. Lots of small business, one of the top places in the country for entrepreneurs and new businesses and startups that have a really great probability of being successful. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and I know from my involvement there, just seeing how much activity and movement there is in the business community. So this is always going to be a place where people are going to want to live and play and work and retire and learn and build their portfolios and build their wealth. So we have we're pretty positive on the outlook for the Okanagan and Kelowna. The biggest thing right now is going to be showing patience and understanding the trends in the market, in the real estate industry. If you just became a new investor 4 years ago, 5 years ago, this is going to be hard to get through this right now. It's going to be tough. You're not cash flow positive. You're worrying about making your mortgage. You're worrying about there being maintenance and having to cover the costs. And you're worrying about getting tenants in there that you can't get out. So this is where a professional property manager comes in. We know all the tricks of the trade. We do this this is kind of obviously our specialty. We understand the psychology of tenant relations and how that balance is. We understand all the rules. Like I said earlier, the RTB rules in BC are incredibly strict, and understanding the legislation. There are, I forget how many 1,700 provisions in the Residential Tenancy Act, all of them which are important to know. And I'm guessing that a lot of landlords don't know them all. I don't know them all either, but we know where to find the answers and where they're important. So understanding knowledge is very, very, very important to managing your property here.
Appreciate your time, Trina. We do have a great question in the chat here. The new speculation tax in the Okanagan, is it also affecting long-term rentals?
Well, I don't think it's affecting anything differently than what it was. I mean, people have properties here and they're going to leave them empty mostly because they want to use them. There aren't a lot of investors who are buying properties here and just leaving them empty. There's not a lot of people who are coming here and just parking their money in an investment and leaving. They are buying properties here, and if they're empty for most of the year, it's because they don't want to put in a long-term tenant. They want to use it for part of the year. We've got a lot of high-end luxury executive homes on the water. We're talking like $6-7 million homes. A lot of professional hockey players have homes here in Kelowna on the lake, and they're not wanting tenants. They really truly aren't. So they're willing to pay the spec tax, and they can afford to pay the spec tax. They want that property to enjoy on their own when they want to, and they've never been interested in short-term rentals. So I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to our next speaker, I did want to give everyone a quick second. If you have any other questions for Trina in Kelowna, now would be the absolute time for that. Cool. Well, Trina, again, thank you so much. Your insight is always appreciated. You really are those boots on the ground people, and I know this is one of your favorite things to talk about. So thank you so much for sharing your passion with us. Our next speaker, well, if I had 2 words to describe our next speaker, I would say hardworking. But luckily I have more than 2, so I'm actually going to use 3. And this man truly is friendly, helpful, and dedicated to what he is doing within the Toronto market. Vince is a powerhouse of a mortgage broker who recently joined Real Property Management to create a one-stop shop for Toronto real estate investors. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Vince Gaetano of Real Property Management Wealth Builders Toronto.
Thanks, Michelle. And in addition to that, I also run a mortgage investment corp as well as a construction unit to help investors get to where they need to be. But to review the events of 2023, our Shad pointed it out, interest rates continued to rise throughout the year and caused quite a bit of challenges for investors and homeowners alike. Affordability in Toronto has been the biggest issue. With rising rates comes higher payments, and in the mortgage business, we always say people don't buy houses, they buy payments. And when you can't afford them, it creates problems on the turnover side of it and on the purchasing side as well. The big news in the city was the introduction of garden suites in April. This complemented the laneway suite program that was gaining some traction. And the Garden Suite initiative was added on to allow folks that have closed off units to add a coach house or a garden suite, as we call them here, to their property to add additional units. Go on to the next slide. With the stress on cash flow, people have been looking for additional revenue opportunities. With the Garden Suite initiative, the city also added a new provision where, as of right, each homeowner can have 4 units on a property. The high density goal of the city has provided tremendous opportunity for folks to convert their single family homes into 4 units. And it's proven to be quite popular for those that do have the capital and the foresight to take advantage of this. We do have some issues in the city where most of the new units that have been built are primarily condos, and 75% of those are 1 bedroom in nature. So there is a mismatch between what is being built and what is the composition of the family unit. And it's very difficult to raise families in 1 bedroom units, as you can appreciate. So it's prevented a tremendous opportunity to add units where you could have a basement unit, main floor unit, as well as a second level unit, plus the addition of a garden suite or laneway to make it 4 units. And most of these properties would be 2 bedroom plus in size, and provides a tremendous opportunity for families looking for low rise accommodations. The depressed values that the city and the GTA did experience from peak to trough, it's been about an 19% decrease from the peak of, February 2022. So what we have seen is anyone with capital and a penchant to take advantage of good value have jumped into the market and purchased up units. They have overcome the challenge of affordability and have put more down payment to make things cash flow. One of the big challenges in the investment side has been condos. Condos are not cash flowing. I attribute it to novice investors who opted for variable rates on an investment property. I would consider these more speculators as opposed to investors that would match their fixed rents with fixed mortgage costs. And that has posed a significant problem as people try to get out of these investments and are unable to because people who want to buy them don't want to take on an existing tenant. And as Trina has pointed out, the landlord tenant board in Ontario is probably worse than that in BC, and trying to get rid of a tenant is quite difficult, and the backlog is quite excessive and runs anywhere between 6 to 9 months, depending on what queue you fall into. Single family permits being issued are at an all-time low. And for those folks that are trying to take advantage of this new bylaw allowing up to 4 units, it's causing quite a problem because the city is still behind on the permit process. It's very slow. And as an investor in this market, patience is a virtue. You must be able to cope with the constant delays that the city throws at you. And one example I would use is there is no express line for anyone trying to add net new units in Ontario or the city, because they will any net new permit for new units is going to sit behind a permit for someone wanting to build a deck or a permit for someone wanting to repair their chimney. There's no express lines for just net new rental units, and that is a major opportunity that this city could take advantage of by allowing some type of an express line in the permit process. You know, when you go to the Ministry of Transportation, they have an express line for dealerships. I can't see why they cannot do it for net new rental units, which the city is in dire need of. With the challenges of the landlord tenant board, I think it's very key to get professional management. The relationship between the landlord and the tenant has to be a professional one. And we believe that treating your tenant like a customer, as Trina's pointed out, is key. If you make your apartment or your unit welcoming and you are in the business of making sure they enjoy your unit, there's going to be a mutual respect that's going to pay spades for you. So I really strongly appreciate the professional management part of it. And that's one of the reasons why we extended our offering to offer this, because we felt that a lot of our clients on the mortgage side were stuck with 1 or 2 units because they just didn't want to deal with the tenant relationship. And being in the media for as long as I have, close to 2 decades, one thing I have learned very clearly is that the media lives by a motto: if it bleeds, it leads. They're known to share bad news, but there are great landlord-tenant relationships out there, and you're probably just hearing about the anomalies in the marketplace that scare people off. And there is this tool, a professional property manager, that can help you. The other issue is securing credit. Getting mortgages and financing has become very difficult because of the stress test and all the qualifying criteria. But one thing that I believe is going to be a little bit more challenging is lenders starting to appreciate the value of these multi-units. They're not, a lot of appraisers and lenders aren't fully appreciating these coach houses or garden suites and laneway suites and the added value they bring to the property. And we're lobbying all lenders as well as appraisers to understand this. And I strongly recommend you use an AACI appraiser who's designated to provide a better value of your property than a standard CRA appraiser. So make sure your appraiser has that designation, because they have a few more tools at their disposal to provide a better value for that property when you're looking and seeking financing. So as I pointed out, the opportunities in the GTA and Toronto proper is the 4-unit as of right opportunity. Anyone who has a low-rise property now has the opportunity to increase their ROI. And when you have that ability to increase your rents from possibly $3,000 a month to potentially $12,000 a month by investing in that property and taking advantage of the new bylaws that have been introduced, I think there's a tremendous opportunity here for folks to ramp up that ROI and reap the benefits of that initial investment. And some tips to maximize your ROI: hire professionals. If you're looking to repurpose your home, make sure you're dealing with architects and developers that know the bylaws, know the zoning. The city of Toronto, as much as it's been amalgamated by 5 cities, each old city still has their own bylaws within it. So not every old bureau has the same bylaws in it as all of them do. So you must have that professional guidance and support, and it make your process and transition a lot easier. You have to prepare for delays, and you have to understand that the city does not move fast. The city of Toronto, as much as everybody thinks that things are moving in the right direction with new bylaw changes, the bureaucracy is still there. It's still fat. There's not a lot of efficiencies in it, and you got to have a lot of patience. And the lack of building on new permits is providing opportunities for renovations to be cheaper. There are a lot more trades looking for work, and that could pose an opportunity for you to get some good deals and quicker completions of projects as more trades are readily available. And my prediction for the real estate market is that we're going to be seeing higher rates for longer. I don't foresee any relief in sight for the next few quarters. We may see a couple of Bank of Canada drops at the latter part of the year, but for the most part, I think everybody's got to respect the lag. It does take 24 months for all these interest rate hikes to work through the system, and we're still seeing inflation very sticky. We are going to see some pain as more and more people renew their mortgages, including investors. They're going to see some sticker shock with payments and or payment shock, that is. And we are looking at 2.2 million homeowners renewing their mortgages over the next 24 months. So that's almost about 100,000 homeowners seeing a payment shock per month. And that could pose folks selling because they can't handle it, and it could provide an opportunity to buy some good value homes in some key areas. And one thing I will say is, if you're near a transit hub, try to pick up anything that is near one. And if you're within 500 meters of a transit hub, you are technically supposed to be fast-tracked with your permits, although I haven't seen any indication of that yet. And I thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vince. Speaking of permits, actually, we do have a question here in the chat. How long are you seeing for new net permits to be issued by the City of Toronto?
Okay, that's a really good question. And what I try to always tell people is, if you want to speed up the permit process, make sure you go through a zoning review. And the zoning review is the first step to determine whether or not your new build fits within the parameters of the bylaw. And if you could work within the parameters of the bylaw, that's going to speed up the process, because you don't have to go to a committee of adjustments and have to deal with neighbors and have to deal with anybody who objects your plan. If you stay within the bylaw, you could get a permit within 7 to 12 weeks of your zoning review approval. So, it could be fairly quick, and it all depends on the examiner you get. Sometimes, you're dealt a bad hand, and you have a novice who's always referring to their supervisor, and everybody's working from home and walking their dog and running errands, so they're not always at their desk. So it does take a little bit longer. In some cases, when you're dealing with a renovation of a main house to a triplex and adding a garden suite or a laneway, sometimes those permits are separated and go to two different examiners, and it may delay things. You might get a garden suite permit before you get your main house permit. It doesn't make any sense, but this is the bureaucracy you're dealing with in the city of Toronto. But I would budget 7 to 12 weeks. If you're going in for minor variances and you have to go to committee of adjustments, you're opening up yourself to a long, long delay that could take 6 to 8 months, depending on how much opposition you have and how many variances you're going for.
Perfect. Thank you. And lastly, the designation of the appraiser that you were mentioning of, what is that designation again?
AACI.
AACI. Perfect. Well, Vince, thank you so much for joining us and giving your insight as well. It's always lovely to have another perspective, especially with your background in mortgage brokering. So if anyone is looking for that one-stop shop, please feel free to reach out to Vince in the Toronto and GTA area.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask one quick question, Michelle, of Vince?
Of course.
If you're around, just because your background, when you're looking at laneways and when you're approaching banks, when you think about the timing of it, you're talking about, permits and potential delays and variances. But from an approach of financing now, is there any insights or tips that maybe you can give some investors? I want to back up one step and say this. Is that when we see the bureaucracy that continues to get in the way, and we hear all these stories about the government fixing the problem and getting more, supply on the market, don't hold your breath. There's still going to be always a strong, strong demand and not enough supply for a very extended period of time. That's just no way around that. So having said that, when you see the opportunities where you could possibly cash flow by adding those laneways or renovating and adding an extra suite, I want to just any insights you can give investors in terms of best way to approach the bank. I mean, they're going to sit down with somebody like yourself as a broker, perhaps with your experience, and take some guidance. But anything off the top, say, here's a couple of definitives.
The reality is when you're dealing with the banks, you're dealing with jacks of all trades, and they don't necessarily understand that market. I think you got to find a local mortgage broker who understands investment properties. And we offer construction financing. We offer construction financing at more aggressive rates for contractors we know. And we're a little bit more flexible in advancing draws from certain contractors we know are getting the job done. So we don't necessarily have to get stage appraisals. We might just take the contractor's pictures, do a site visit, and we'll advance in 24, 48 hours to keep that project on the go. When you're dealing with institutions, they're having to send out an appraiser out there. They want to hit certain milestones. And if some of those milestones are missed, it causes delays. And one thing GCs or contractors want is they want to keep the line moving and keep those trades going hard. And if you have everything lined up, you should be able to do a full project within a 12-month period of time the permit is issued.
So Vince, and Michelle, I want to shine a light on what Vince just said. And I just want to really point out that this is exactly why, for those of you who are paying attention and where you look at how important it is to have a great network of individuals who are in it. And as Vince said, there's ways to I don't want to say work around the banks, but if you've got a project, there are other options than just going to the bank and getting caught in that big wheel called, okay, well, we got to do this and then we got to do that. When you're working with an investor-focused mortgage broker, they have access to different ways of getting funds, and it's not always overly expensive. It still can make business sense. There can be a strong business case for it. But again, just shine a light on why it's so important to surround yourself with like-minded people, stay in a community. Vince, thanks for that insight. It's perfect.
Thank you.
Jumping right back into this. So hello, everyone. I know that I haven't really formally introduced myself. So again, my name is Michelle Fong. I'm actually the Business Development Associate here at Real Property Management Canada. So essentially what that means is I work with new and upcoming and some experienced investors who love property management and want to break into the property management space. So I will be giving a little bit of an update from Halifax. Now, I am in Calgary. The reason I'm going to be talking about Halifax today, though, is because we are hearing a lot of what's going on from this province. And quite honestly, we are looking for representation and somebody who does want to work with the investors and the tenants that are happening within Nova Scotia. So without further ado, I'm just going to hop into this. So, as we've heard from Trina, and of course everyone does know that BC went through some new regulations in terms of short-term rentals. Nova Scotia is the other province that we see starting to enact regulations limiting the short-term rentals. Now, they haven't done a copy and paste of what is happening in BC. They're more taking a little bit of a different spin around it, where they have restricted short-term rentals to really only being available in commercial and mixed zone areas. Now, that's fine for investors that do have those properties, but they are predicting a little bit of those might hit the resale market in the future here, still to be determined, as Nova Scotia is not moving as fast as BC with these new regulations. Also, what we saw within Nova Scotia and Halifax was the majority of residents that are flocking to this province are university students and young professionals. A big reason behind that is, out of all major cities in Canada, they are still one of the markets that remains relatively affordable. For example, one bedrooms are renting at around $1,200 right now. With that being said, too, remember that it's a huge university city. There are 6 universities around Nova Scotia, speaking of the which. That is one of the key areas and interests that is happening in terms of investors flocking to the right neighborhood. So definitely around universities. As I said, it's a younger demographic. They want the affordable rents and they want the affordable homes. So they're seeking that out all the way across the country there. Other types of opportunities that we are seeing and hearing from are downtown Halifax as well as the North End. So downtown inner city cores are always going to be popular, and we can see that from every single province in those large major cities. However, the north end of Halifax is also gaining a lot of attention as they're working towards redevelopment, really creating ideal millennial life. Now, I do say that as a millennial myself, but they are really focusing on certain amenities such as newer restaurants, music venues, and adding in walkability, adding a lot of commercial spaces to increase the walkability. Now, some tips that I'd love to offer to all RAIN members is, very first off, adopt smart technology. So our Shad talked about keeping the appliances well and maintained. I recommend that if you are looking for those great tenants, those young professionals, those students that are looking for the multi, or even families that are looking to move to that area, again, for the affordability, that smart technology is what's going to put your rental a little bit higher in your competition than the rest, especially if everything else is cleaned, manicured, and well maintained. It's some of those things that help save on electricity bills, as well as just make the living inside the home a little bit more pleasurable. Because at the end of the day, as you've heard from all of our speakers, we are seeing people want to rent for longer. Millennials and Gen Z have made a decision due to a couple of various factors, such as affordability in the market, depending on which market they're in, as well as just choosing to want to grow their families in certain places. They are wanting these advancements in their rental because, again, it makes it feel like home. As you've heard from tonight, lean into the guidance. So congratulations to everyone that is here. You have made a great choice in joining us tonight, because you should lean into the guidance of professionals, but at the end of the day, always know your market. I highly recommend understanding your Residential Tenancy Act. Each province has one, and it's very different from province to province. So knowing the base facts, you do not have to memorize it. You do not need to be a master, but these are the types of things that make sure that you can always stay competitive and always understand where your tenants are coming from as well, so you can treat them like the best customers when you found those great tenants to put inside your rental. As well, to echo what some of my fellow speakers have said here, create a budget. If you are one of the investors that is a little bit nervous about 2024, we hear things like interest rates are going to be up, renewal shock, so on and so forth. The best way to mitigate yourself now is to look over your annual budget. One of my favorite quotes I like to think about is, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. If you have not established that budget and 2024 numbers are starting to make you nervous, take a peek, run the numbers, look at your return, look at your cash flow. and determine what is the best course of path. With that being said, when you start to look at your budget, you do want to understand your maintenance and appliance timelines. When it comes to appliance and a majority of maintenance that can be done inside of a home, a lot of it is not if it will happen, it is a when. But I've got good news for you. A lot of that can be controlled, and you do have a lot of power over when will happen. Now, if you don't understand exactly when to make those timelines and what that budget should look like, reach out to a property manager, because this is what it comes down to when they are looking at protecting your investments and working on maximizing your assets. As well as a couple predictions for the real estate market in Halifax for 2024. CMHC is predicting an 8% increase. Now, they are relatively affordable compared to a majority of Canada, with the average price right now being around $399 for a single family home. But they are looking to increase that. So for anyone who is potentially looking at maybe some more pricier neighborhoods around the country, Halifax might be one of those places that you might want to look at. As they are starting to see that increase. We're not, no city in Canada is not affected by the increases for sure, but you definitely want to pay attention to the fact that they will be, that it is affecting everybody, and that Halifax right now is at a good medium before they see that. As well as a lot of the newer developments are going to be focused around condominiums versus the single family home. Condominiums are, again, playing into that millennial and Gen Z and university young professional lifestyle. Instead of having neighborhoods of just strictly single family homes, they're really putting serious consideration into more amenities. And so that's why we're seeing a higher density in some of these areas as well. So if that is something that you are wanting to look at, take a peek. There are tons of new developments happening in Halifax, but they will be focused around that condo market.
Great, I did Michelle. Go through. We do have a question here for you.
Yes.
So Cody asks, what is the outlook for Eastern Passage and the surrounding areas to Halifax? And are there any meetups or real estate groups in Nova Scotia? I am in the process of moving there.
Awesome. Happy to hear that for you, Cody. Well, for the Eastern Passage and surrounding areas of Halifax, they're not going to see the same strong ripple effect that we see in comparison to like Vancouver or Kelowna, vice versa, Toronto and the GTA, much stronger ripple. But that doesn't mean that Halifax is invulnerable to that. It's still got a high activity, but it will eventually see that ripple, just not as fast paced as we are noticing in other provinces. In terms of meetup for real estate groups, there are some smaller real estate groups, but I have noticed compared to the rest of the country, they are fewer and far between, but there definitely are real estate investors there. You can find groups through Facebook as well as Meetup and other local organizations like that. Cody, feel free to send me a message if you would like to see the list that I have. I'm happy to share that with you too, because I do want to, I've been engaging with these groups. I really do want to find some sort of representation when it comes down to it.
Michelle, we have another question here from Ian. What is the outlook for the southern part of Nova Scotia?
Southern part of Nova Scotia. Well, Ian, I have to admit, right now I'm actually physically located in Calgary. We just are hearing Nova Scotia and Halifax naturally comes up because we are hearing from the residents in particular of this province that they need assistance, that they are looking for homes, that they are looking for help. So what we are seeing is definitely a high renters pool, and renters who are wanting to be on wait lists, renters who are wanting to be pre-approved and trying to get into the best fit rental that they can. Again, a lot of these are coming from students and young professionals. In terms of development, it's really, again, focused around Halifax as they are building out further communities, but it wouldn't surprise me if that starts to, again, ripple effect around the province.
Great, that's good, Michelle, thank you.
Awesome. Well, speaking of the which, Chiyoko? With that being said, I would like to introduce everyone to not only my question moderator, but our last but not by all least speaker, Chiyoko Kikino, our new Executive Vice President of Real Property Management Canada.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to all of our speakers, Arshad, Vince, Trina, Michelle, you've been absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much everyone out there for spending your valuable time with us. Again, I'm Chiyoko Kikino, with Real Property Management Canada. I am in Vancouver, and it was snowing when we started, so I'm not quite sure what it's doing now. But I did want to start off by summarizing some of the key tips that you heard from our speakers today, starting with the real estate investment landscape. Properties and buying land is still a wonderful investment. So investors actually in 2023 accounted for 30% of the home buying transactions that were taking place in Canada. So you can never go wrong when you're investing in real estate, as we all know. Rents continue to grow. You heard some of the increases in the various cities throughout Canada, but rent actually increased for 2024 versus 2023. Rents actually increased by 10%. And so they went up across Canada. So they went up to $2,196. And Nova Scotia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan led the rent growth. So you heard Michelle talk about Halifax. Of course, that's an area of opportunity. Alberta's, of course, booming. We've been talking about Alberta for the last 4 years, and that continues to be a great opportunity. Vacancy rates are at its lowest. As everyone mentioned, there is more demand than there is supply. And as Trina put it really, really well, you need to treat your tenants like gold, because good tenants are really the key to your success. And making sure that you treat them like customers is just a great piece of advice for a number of the speakers today. We did want to give you a little bit of the layout of the land. So when we look at Canada, just for your knowledge, this might be a fun fact for some of you, is that part of Canada is regulated and part of Canada is unregulated. So you can see here the red provinces. So we're talking about Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC are regulated provinces. That means that property managers in those provinces do need special licensing from the Real Estate Association or their board to be able to conduct property management for investors. When we look at Ontario East, it's all unregulated. So you don't need any specific licensing. You just really need that passion and that drive to be able to do a wonderful job. And of course, learn for companies like Real Property Management, the proper way of doing property management. I know that a lot of the speakers today talked about why it's important to align yourself with a property management professional. And I'm going to talk about some of the qualities that a property management professional should have. But at the end of the day, it's really about the mindset. Property management professionals have a very different mindset than just anybody doing this. And so, and I can only talk to Real Property Management and all of our office owners and all of our network members that we have, but we don't see us as property managers. We actually see us as asset managers. And that's a very different mindset. So our purpose of Real Property Management is to preserve our investors' assets, so to protect them. We want to help them grow their return on investment, and then we want to help them also build generational wealth. So we treat our investors' assets like they're our assets. And that's what's really important, is a little bit of a different mindset. Just, as you're going out there and you're looking for the right professional that fits with you, here's some qualities that you should look for when you're looking for a property management professional. First of all, property managers need excellent communication skills to interact with tenants, property owners, vendors, and other stakeholders effectively. Clear and timely communication, of course, helps to address concerns. It helps to resolve conflict, and it keeps everyone informed about anything pertaining to that particular property. Property managers also need local knowledge and experience, so they are familiar with the specific market dynamics of the area. They are the ones that know trends, they know demand patterns, and pricing fluctuations that it can affect rental properties. And this insight really actually helps enable them to make informed decisions regarding rental rates, some of the marketing strategies that are used to market that property, and then, of course, property investments overall. They also need to have knowledge of the real estate laws and regulations. Again, if you are operating or you have investment properties in some of the regulated provinces, they really need to know what those laws and regulations are to make sure we abide by them and continue to stay ethical. And then, of course, a professional would know some of the regulations in some of the even unregulated provinces. So it's important to find that person that knows that information so you can make sure that your property is well taken care of. Property managers also must pay close attention to detail to ensure that properties are well maintained in compliance with the regulation and lease agreements. This includes, of course, conducting thorough property inspections, reviewing contracts, and keeping accurate records. They also have to have good financial management. So they really need a good financial acumen, since they are responsible for managing budgets, collecting rent, and handling financial transactions related to properties. They need strong financial management skills, are really essential for maintaining profitability and to ensuring that expenses are kept under control. And then property managers also have to have great problem-solving skills, since they encounter, of course, numerous issues on a daily basis, ranging from emergencies on the maintenance standpoint to tenant disputes. So the ability to quickly assess what's going on, identify solutions, and making sound decisions is really critical for resolving problems efficiently. And they need to be definitely customer service oriented. So that is the key to tenant retention and satisfaction. So property managers really should be responsive to tenant inquiries and concerns. They need to address issues promptly and strive to create that positive living and safe experience for their tenants. So as Trina said, treat your tenants like gold. If they're bringing you, anywhere between 25,000, 50,000 a year, that's a really good client. So make sure you take care of them. So why partner with professionals? Again, I can only speak on behalf of Real Property Management, but the reason you really want to align yourselves with a property management professional is that we have the knowledge and the experience. So Real Property Management is the most recognized brand in North America, with over 425 offices and 40 years experience in this industry. So not only are you getting the property manager or the office manager that's with property management, but you actually get the power and the brain power of the entire network. And so that is something that is powerful. And our franchise owners are always sharing best practices. So you're really always benefiting from that learning that is taking place every single day. And at a local level, each office is locally owned and operated. So these are people that live in the community. They're passionate about property management, as we mentioned at the very beginning of our session, and they're really dedicated to helping their clients and tenants have extraordinary experiences. From a communication standpoint, our property managers keep in contact with the entire process. They provide weekly updates on applicants, monthly reports on revenue and vendor costs. We have high standards when it comes to processes and systems, and we make sure that we're implementing specific processes that we go through to onboard clients and to ensure that our tenants are getting the best experience that they can in the properties. We are tech powered, so in today's digital age, of course, property managers also rely on software and technology platforms to help streamline processes, to help track maintenance requests, and to communicate with tenants and property owners. So a professional in this industry will have the right technology to help achieve all this. And then we are, you need to, at Real Property Management, we are available 24/7, 365 days a week. We make sure that we say we have your back, and we definitely do. It doesn't mean that we're there in person, but we have technology like AI to be able to ensure that we are handling issues like maintenance requests or maintenance issues very quickly, and we are making sure that our vendors are screened and vetted for quality performance. And then last but not least, as I go back to the beginning, is that we have a caring mindset. We treat your asset like they're our assets, and it's a very different mindset. So again, we say that we're not property management, we're actually asset managers. So just giving you a quick rundown of Real Property Management. With over 40 years in the real estate investment category, Real Property Management is a nationwide leader. So we are the most successful, the most recognized full-service property management company in North America. We have over 400 offices that manage and lease and maintain over 70,000 investment properties. So we are, again, the most recognized brand in North America, and we are very, very proud of that. Here in Canada, we are the country's #1 property management company. We have 26 offices, as we said, from coast to coast. So we have the country well covered. But we are still looking for additional family members to join us. So we do have franchise opportunities in a number of different markets. When we look at Western Canada, we're looking at Vancouver, Lower Mainland. We'd love to welcome some new franchise partners in that area. Northern BC, Regina, Winnipeg. If we look east, we're looking at parts of the GTA. So we are starting to sell out. We're getting lots of traction in GTA. We're looking at Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Oshawa, London, Niagara Falls, Kingston, Halifax, and then Charlottetown and Fredericton. So we are very happy to welcome any discussions on if you're looking at getting into this industry as a profession and you want to take that next step in your career. We're definitely here for you. So Michelle, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Sounds good, Chiyoko, and thank you so much. To everyone who has taken the time out of their night to come spend it with the RPM team, we appreciate you and hope that you got some great key takeaways. With that being said, I know that we've been answering some questions throughout the time here, but I would love if you would, if you have any questions for the experts in the room tonight, please feel free to come off your mic, put it in the chat, have a discussion with us, and before we do that, I'll let Patrick wrap up and we'll go into Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, I think thanks very much, everybody. On the RPM team, I've certainly had the honor and the privilege to work with you quite a lot over the past few years, and had the opportunity to meet you and speak at your events, and I've really enjoyed it. I mean, the team is awesome. The feedback is always very, very good, to say the very least. And so, something that you mentioned there, Michelle, and I think that for those of you who are on the line that are listening to what Chiyoko and Michelle were talking about, is that there is some real business opportunities there on the franchise side of this equation. And I know there's been RAIN members in the past that have taken advantage of that to really get into the next level of business. So for those of you who are considering that RPM as somebody that you would want to align yourself with, I cannot stress enough the importance of working with a trusted partner like RPM. And really, it's so interesting that when we go through these cycles, it is the time that you need the right professionals on your side. And it's in these kinds of conversations and these opportunities that you can get your questions answered. So take advantage of the expertise that we've got lined up in front of you to get those questions answered. There's a saying that I heard that there is no dumb questions. The only dumb questions are the ones that don't get asked. So make sure that you do ask any questions that you might have. It's a perfect opportunity to do that. There's a couple of things that I would take away from all of this, not the least of which is these are certainly in specific geographic regions are, uncertain, and because of interest rates and all the rest of it. Having been through these cycles, I can't stress enough. Now, I've been investing in real estate for over 20 years. I've been in business over 40 years. I've seen these cycles before. Are they uncomfortable? 100%. But I can say this, that in every cycle that we've ever seen and been through, and I know this one's different, but ultimately there is always opportunities that show up for those that stay engaged and pay attention to what's happening. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Trina that might have mentioned it, that there's going to be some people that are going, I got to get from under this. And this is where maybe some advanced strategies come into place, and there are agreements for sale, and there's vendor financing, and there's all sorts of ways to construct deals for those who are a little bit more educated, a little more sophisticated. And the one thing that RAIN community has access to is a lot of professionals, and you want to tap into that. Don't go it alone. You don't need to. You are not alone in any of this. So even if you're facing some challenges, then make sure that you get those questions asked and answered. Okay. What else we got? Anything else showing up?
Looks like Benjamin's got his hand up first.
Question, the RPM group sounds excellent. When one's budgeting for a purchase, it seems like this should be included in that budget. How does one do that budgeting process or plan for an RPM manager or a group of people?
I think, Trina, since you're off mute already, I'll let you take this one.
Well, I guess I would ask you how you value your time, what value you put to your time. So, because what we do are basically take everything off your hands and you don't have to worry about anything. So I guess I would say, what's your time worth to you, and where can you better spend your time doing the things that you do best?
Oh, no, that sounds lovely, but I was looking for, is it a dollar figure per asset group or is it a local market consideration? Obviously, when you're considering making a purchase, that dollar figure is important. My time's worth a lot to me, but the bank doesn't consider it so,
For
so I
sure.
was wondering how to do that process.
Each of our offices has our own rates, and it really is based on the market of our each individual markets. I can say for us in Kelowna, we are anywhere between 10, around average of 10%. But if we have a client who has a portfolio, a larger portfolio, or if it's a multi-unit complex with 200 doors, there's definitely room for negotiations there. But I would say average 10%. Would be a safe number, and that would take into it a lot of the, maybe the management rate is 9% that you're getting, but that might include, you're going to want inspections, you're going to want some extra add-on admin, marketing upgrades, perhaps tenant credit checks, some hard costs that we need to recover. I would say 10% is a pretty baseline for you to budget for.
Yeah, 100%. And just Michelle, maybe you could put, how do people get in touch with you? Do you want to maybe put it in the chat? How do people reach out, and who do they reach out to? Best contact information?
Absolutely. I'm going to throw that in the chat right now.
Tiffany, again, you're 10% is a good place to enter in terms of a budget. And then when you sit down as an individual and have your conversation with the independent franchise owners, it may vary a little bit, but ultimately, if you use 10%, you're going to be pretty close in general. And Michelle, if you want to add to that, or Trina, then this is your game, better than mine.
I can add to that. I think they're asking. So there's no such thing as a standard. Everyone's a little bit different, depending on what level of service you want. So with our office, we have different levels of service. It just depends on what the investor is looking to get back as far as having their asset managed. Now, going back to Benjamin's question, I think one thing that would be helpful too is if you're making an investment, okay, this is my purchase price, these are my closing costs, this is what it's costing me every month. Us property managers could help you budget and say, okay, this is what our fee is. This is what looks like your costs are as far as mortgage payments, insurance, taxes. We come up with a budget and maybe a little bit of money set aside for a reserve fund, as I call it. And then you can come up. But what's important is the fact of we have the data. We have most likely other units in the area to be able to tell you, okay, this is what is posted on rentals.ca or whatever you're looking at to get your data. But this is the reality of what these things are actually renting for. And then we're going to give you better than just a stat of average rents. We're going to give you, okay, here's what real life people are renting for in the neighborhood. Budget from these numbers. I think that's the most important, is the data.
Thank you very much.
Arshad or whomever, do you want to just talk a little bit about maybe some of the reporting that you would do on a monthly basis? So, for example, do you take some of the pressure off from a bookkeeping point of view? What am I getting am I getting a report monthly? Do I get it on the 15th of the following month? Do I get it on the 1st of the following month? Can you speak to that just a little bit in terms of efficiencies that might help me in terms of, back to Benjamin's point? And I think, whoever made the call, what's your time worth? And, so how do you work? Is that also kind of based on what the independent will do, or is there the system there in place?
That again, in our office, depends on the level of service, but
Yep.
typically we're offering all of our clients have access to an owner portal. So very similar to when you're doing your online banking, you have your own, you can log into your account. We have a pretty interesting dashboard that you can see really from a high level perspective what's going on with your investment. You can see where your expenses are going, maintenance, how much money has come in from tenants, how much money has gone out for all of your expenses. Those online portals also contain all your communications, maintenance information, important documents. So you have everything together in one place. We do monthly accounting. You'll get a statement every month on the 15th of the month, and that will be, basically your rent revenue minus all your expenses, and then your monthly payout. And then at the end of the year, we prepare annual statements for you to give it to your accountant, so your accountant doesn't You're not handing your accountant a bunch of maintenance invoices and receipts. We put together a pretty comprehensive annual statement for you to hand to your accountant that makes your year end really, really easy.
Great. I've got one more question, but I think there's somebody ahead of me, so I'll save my question for our guests.
I made a promise in the chat there, so let's talk
Yes, I
about
saw
how,
that. Michelle, I saw that, so I just backed right off.
let's I'm gonna open this up to Arshad. Hey Arshad, how do you vet tenants?
Well, there's obviously the typical process where you do the credit check, you check for financials, income verification. Also depends. Right now in Calgary, we're seeing an influx of people from everywhere, so it's a little harder to get that data. We have some software that allows us to pull information from banking across Canada, but perhaps even overseas, Ukraine or South America. There's some tools there so to give us some insight. Okay, what's the track record for these tenants on paying on time and what bills they pay. But a lot of it comes down to the training on vetting clients and getting that feel. What is it like in person when you're talking to them? And but we do actually look at their financial statements if they're willing to provide it. Most of them are income, and then we do actually call all their references. So past landlords, employment, we call them, and then we get a good general feel of who they are and who else is in that family. So if it's you're talking, usually you're dealing with one person that's the decision maker, but there's other people involved. So we vet everybody, and it comes down to face to face. I'm a big believer in face to face and belly to belly, and our property managers make sure they do that.
Fantastic.
Vince, I believe you might have had something to add to that as well.
Yeah, like we take a different approach. We use a lot of mortgage related vetting. We really dissect that credit bureau and look at the addresses on the bureau where the individual previously lived at. And when we call past landlords, we try to go back beyond the last one. If they're a problem tenant, the last landlord is going to want to get rid of them. So they're not going to necessarily tell you the truth. So we want to go far back as 2-3 landlords ago that match up to the credit bureau addresses and do searches on those properties to see who the actual owner of the property is. And we also go to third-party tools like Flinks, for example, where you could pull 12 months bank statements and make sure all rent payments were made on time. And as a reporting landlord, what we try to do is we try to report to the credit bureau how they behave as a tenant. So if it's a new to Canada individual, it's a great way for them to establish their credit rating. And we help them along the process to try to turn them into a homeowner at some point in time. So we'd like to give them the place for 3 to 5 years and try to get them out so those rents could reset, because it is so difficult to maintain market rents with the average guideline increase in Ontario. And if they're not a good tenant and they miss payments, we'll probably be the last landlord they have, because we will be reporting to the credit bureau missed payment. So these are some of the tactics we use to make sure we maintain good quality tenants. And I think it's peace of mind for the investor, and it's value that is provided by our franchises to make sure that we manage that property like it's our own, and make sure you get a good rate of return on it.
Beautiful. Something that Arshad said that I want to, and Vince as well. As we know, tenant screening is really important, and you have access to tools that, self-managed individuals don't have access to those tools. So, there's so much value in having a great property manager, and there's just a couple of examples right there.
Well, to add on something Trina said earlier in the presentation, and that is knowing the act and knowing what you're able to do and what you can't do. And in Ontario, for example, the city of Toronto is going to experience a very high tax increase, property tax increase. And in our act, we are able to get an above guideline increase when municipal taxes exceed the guideline by more than 50%. So knowing that gives a landlord an opportunity to increase the rents beyond the guideline limit. And it's those little things that we know that most people don't, that keep that rent at market rates as best you could. And that does get passed on to the investor.
That's great.
I know Trina has 2 cents to add to this, and I know that I trust Trina's gut when it comes to it too.
I'm the quiet one in the crowd. Yeah, we're the same way as Vince. We definitely have pretty comprehensive screening techniques. We also know that in BC in particular, there are a lot of professional tenants out there who do know the act, who do know how to do the workarounds, and who do know how to leverage it to their advantage. So we see situations who never clients of ours, but if you're ever up for a read, follow the BC landlord and tenants Facebook group for some frightening stories of some of the things that are going on in the landlord space in BC, of tenants who can pretty much postpone their tenancy for upwards of a year without paying any rent, without being actually forcibly removed. So making sure that you put in good tenants and making sure you know how to get rid of bad tenants is really, really, really important. And prevention is the number one thing. So putting in good tenants, we do a lot of background checks. We have access to a lot of software that the average landlord won't have. We're checking, soft checks. We're scraping, different servers across the world to see if there's been any news articles or blogs or reporting. We can get soft checks done on our tenants to see what their histories are. Of course, criminal record checks, and really sensing patterns of tenants. So it's not just confirming income or employment. Those are actually pretty easy things to do. It's really just trying to figure out the character of the tenants and where they're coming from and where they're going, so you can get a sense of what the mitigating all the risks. Definitely.
Just a quick question, I guess, in terms of what, I've had, one of my portfolios, I've got a property manager that I've worked with for many years, and I know that you do this, but I'd like you to speak to it, which is, I've worked with them. I know my portfolio, they know my portfolio, and, so they don't phone me for every $100, every $500. I go, guys, here, if it's going to be more than $2,500, then phone me, let me know, send me an email. They always give me a heads up, but I don't want to get into the minutia of stuff. I know what they're doing. I know they're making good decisions. So for example, they have, an annual check, and then they have a couple of in the between checks that they're looking around. It gives them a reason to go in, make sure things are still all great. And, they're not reaching out to me saying, we do an annual check for $100. What do you want to do? I just, that's the relationship that we've created with them. But somebody who's approaching you for the first time and is, hiring you as a property management, I cannot stress enough, hire a professional to do your property management. I don't care. Your time is you're going to make mistakes that are going to cost you more unless you're a very experienced landlord. I've worked with thousands of investors over the past 20 plus years, and I could tell you horror stories of individuals who said, I got this. And I went, no, you don't. By the way, they went and they made those mistakes. So the point is this. I'm assuming that somebody is going to sit down with you, Trina or Shad, and say, okay, this is what I want. And you're going to ask them, well, listen, here's some of the things that we do. When do you want us contacting you? What do you want to give us approval for? How do you want to set that up? Now, do any of you or all of you want to kind of speak to it from your perspective on that particular point? Because I think it's an important one. Trina,
Yeah.
or Shad, go. Yeah.
For us, we base it case by case. It depends on the client, how sophisticated they are and experienced, or how new they are. So if they're newer, we'll hold their hand a little, but we have thresholds in our contracts, and you can choose. If it's $100 or more, you want to be notified, we will do that and get your approval. 500 seems to be the majority, but it depends. Like somebody like yourself, Patrick, if it's 2,000, it depends on the trust level too.
Yep.
If it's been a few years, they're with you, they'll know. So that we've got one guy says just do whatever you think's best.
Yeah.
Don't even bother me.
Yeah.
And then you've got some that if it's more than 250, they want to know.
Yeah. Very good.
And can I just give a tip on that too? Just like shop around for a property manager. I mean, we're of course going to be, we're pitching RPM, of course, but we always want people to shop around because we want you to have comparables. We want you to know what the difference of service level is.
Yeah.
We want you to know what the level of transparency is that your property manager is going to give you.
Yeah.
If they're not charging you for maintenance, I would question if they're doing maintenance. If they are like, if their turnover of placements, we see a lot of property managers who actually don't mind when tenants break their lease and leave early because they're getting more placement fees. If they can place a tenant every 9 months in your property, they're going to be charging you a placement fee for every time they place a tenant.
Great point.
If you have a property manager who is really thinking in the terms of asset management, they're going to be like, I want to put in a tenant who's a really, really good tenant who is not going to cause us a lot of heartache or pain or time, because I know not only is that going to be the best for our clients, but it's also going to be the best for us. We want to put in good tenants who are going to stay and who are happy and who are going to value us as landlords. So shop around, ask questions. If they're saying everything is all in, I'd question that. I'd question that it's being done. And, you know, ask the questions about transparency and ask for referrals.
Love it. Good tips there. Okay. Anything else? Got it. Well, I think, Michelle, you guys have done a great job as always. You know, folks, there is great opportunities out there. And when you have awesome management, it just makes it that much better. Confidence is rarely owned. It's almost always borrowed. And when it comes to property management, you borrow it from the best. And RPM is certainly in that category of the best. So reach out, get connected, and grow your portfolio the right way with some great property management. So all of RPM, thanks very much. Thanks for doing this, you guys. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.
Ciao, ciao, everybody.